Lord, you were favourable to your land. You restored the fortunes of Jacob. You forgave the iniquity of your people. You covered all their sins, Selah. You withdrew all your wrath. You turned from your hot anger. Restore us again, O God of our salvation, and put away your indignation toward us. Will you be angry with us forever? Will you prolong your anger to all generations? Will you not revive us again, that your people may rejoice in you? Show us your steadfast love, O Lord, and grant us your salvation. Let me hear what God the Lord will speak, for he will speak peace to his people, to his saints, but let them not turn back to folly. Surely his salvation is near to those who fear him, that glory may dwell in our land. Steadfast love and faithfulness meet, righteousness and peace kiss each other. Faithfulness springs up from the ground, and righteousness looks down from the sky. Yes, the Lord will give what is good, and our land will yield its increase. Righteousness will go before him and make his footsteps a way. Our second reading is from Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 to 10. Seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him, and he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. We thank God for his word.
I retired a couple of years ago, and we moved from Armagh back to Dungannon. I'd left there in 1976 to go to university. I often walk up to the square in Dungannon, sometimes on my way to church. The square sits on a plateau at the top of the town. My parents lived there before I was born, and it's a typical Northern Ireland town. So in the square you'll find a cenotaph, local banks, a post office, solicitors' offices, various shops, and a former police station. At the bottom end of the square are Irish Street, Church Street, and Scotch Street, streaming off in different directions. Their names give a clue to Dungannon's historical, religious, and political divisions. On the 24th of August 1968, 2,500 people marched from Coalisland to Dungannon wanting civil rights. They sought an end to discrimination in housing, jobs, and the gerrymandering of the council wards. Another 1,500 counter-protested in the market square. It was a moment of great tension. Before he died, I asked Andrew Rogers, who was my boyhood minister in Dungannon, about his memories of that day, and he revealed something to me I didn't know. He told me how he, with the Church of Ireland rector, Alfie O'Connor, the Methodist minister, and the Roman Catholic priest, had gathered together in the square, trying to ensure that the protests did not degenerate into worse violence. In 1975, I was in my final year in the Royal School Dungannon. On the 22nd of September, as some of us prepared to go to the Queen's University Open Day, we heard a bomb explode. That was not unusual. It was the days before mobile phones. So it took until later in the day for news to emerge of how the Caledon bus had been leaving off its passengers at the top of the square when a bomb in Scotch Street exploded more than 100 yards away. The jack from the car was catapulted into the sky. It dropped tragically on top of a classmate, Morris Hobson. Now, around that time, Morris had been attending the Christian Endeavour in our church in Scott Street. And I remember visiting him when he lay critical in hospital. I suppose I've got a health warning now. His glasses had shattered his face, requiring 80 stitches. His jaw was broken and his nose smashed. His skull was damaged, causing him to suffer epilepsy, and his eyesight was twisted. When he emerged from a coma after 2 weeks, he underwent extensive plastic surgery. Now, Morris had always been a skilled artist, and after the bomb, he used his art to demonstrate what it's like to be a victim from the inside out. Since his eyesight was skewed, so he intentionally skewed his art. He created more than 80 paintings and photographic-based images, many of which are self-portraits with his face horribly contorted. Tragically, on September the 29th, 1987, Morris suffered a fatal epileptic fit. 30 years on from his death, after his mother's death, his family decided to display his graphic artwork in Ranfurly House in the market square, just yards from the explosion. We went to see them. They were horrifying. But this is what his brother David has said about the reasons for the exhibition. It is to give his life's work recognition and to make people rethink the avenue of violence. We hope it might prevent anybody else going down the route that had led to the condition he found himself in. Morris's art reminded me of how the experience of violence can skew our vision. I've reflected on my own personal experiences growing up in that era, how it may have skewed how I see myself, how I see other communities, how I see God, so how I pray, how I read the Bible. No one has 20/20 vision. In Psalm 85, there's a prayer for the restoration of Israel. And verses 10 and 11 point us towards that restoration, the shape of reconciliation. Love and faithfulness meet together. Righteousness and peace kiss each other. Faithfulness springs forth from the earth, and righteousness looks down from heaven. I'm going to sing later the metrical version, and it goes like this. Mercy now and justice meet, peace and truth for aye embrace. Mercy, justice, peace, truth. 4 virtues that together in tension produce reconciliation. If you like, the 4 sides to a square. The First North-South Ministerial Council met in the council offices in Armagh in 1999. I think they're going to be meeting again in Armagh this week. The offices can be seen from our window on the Newry Road. That morning I was out playing golf, and I'm not a very good golfer, so one slice on the second tee could have produced an international incident. Anyway, it made me think, and in the afternoon I wrote this poem which we used during the Advent season. It's called The New Neighbours. Peace is moving in next door. Black mercs, grinning faces, smoked salmon, polite graces. Peace becoming flesh and dwelling among us. Truth is moving in next door. What happened? Why? Where? And when? Dirty tricks. They disappeared. Butchered men. Truth becoming flesh and dwelling among us. Justice is moving in next door. Power misused and terror spread. Wrongs to be righted and sorry to be said. Justice becoming flesh and dwelling amongst us. Mercy is moving in next door. Men with a past rebuilding a future. Bitter words and all dirty talk no longer a feature. Mercy becoming flesh and dwelling amongst us. Jesus is moving in next door. Peace, truth, justice and mercy, embraced in a manger. Bump into him in neighbour, enemy and stranger. Word becoming flesh and dwelling amongst us. Miroslav Volf is a theologian who grew up in the Balkans, and he combines these ideas in this quote. Communities of sacred memory are at their best schools of right remembering. Remembering that is truthful and just. That heals individuals without injuring others. That allows the past to motivate a just struggle for justice and the grace-filled work of reconciliation. So these four virtues act as the corners of the square. An emphasis on one virtue without recognition of the other can skew the square and make it lopsided. So how can we remember to regain our vision? What's the shape of reconciliation? Well, first of all, we embrace truth. Richard von Weizsäcker was president of West Germany. On May the 8th, 1985, he spoke at the 40th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. His speech that day had a huge influence as Germany faced up to the truth of its recent Nazi past. He said this: remembering truthfully is the first element of reconciliation. Truth straight in the eye, without embellishment and without distortion. In 2016, I became involved in a panel of the Presbyterian Church on a project on how to deal with the past. In the spring of 2017, Norman Hamilton and myself wrote to every active minister in the General Assembly, asking them to nominate people who'd been affected by the Troubles. Working in conjunction with Dr. Gladys Gagnon and Dr. Jamie Johannes from Queen's University, 122 people were interviewed. Much of the funding came from the Department of Foreign Affairs in Dublin. Ministers who were pastorally responsible for congregations which had suffered during the Troubles from 1968 to 2000 shared stories about how they pastored, preached, conducted multiple funerals under the public gaze, while themselves being first responders. Victims of the Troubles, including those who were injured, disabled or disturbed, have told their stories which still throb with sadness. We also listened to those who served in the security forces or were prison officers, many of whom felt their lives were continually under threat, as well as first responders, including ambulance drivers, firefighters, those in the medical professions, and one undertaker. When anarchy reigned on the streets, quiet peacemakers kept order in schools, government, community, and commercial life. Often the most interesting stories came from people who were completely unaware of the significance of their own story. Some Presbyterians who were former paramilitaries and served prison sentences were also interviewed. We had to come to terms with the dark side of our history. The research was further enhanced for some who, for various reasons, had left the Presbyterian Church. Then we listened to some critical friends, including Seamus Mallon, the former Deputy First Minister, and through that I participated in his funeral in January 2020. This book, Considering Grace, was published in November 2019. And I'd been selling them. We're at the third edition now. I've been selling a lot for the Presbyterian Church. I've discovered you can get them cheaper on Amazon now. So if you haven't got one, make sure you get one. I suppose the Presbyterian Church courageously decided to allow others to critically assess our witness. It was very important to tell our stories so that future generations will have access not only to the facts of what occurred, but at what it felt like to live through difficult times and confess where we got things wrong. He looked purely at the Presbyterian Church, but it also has affected other churches. So, for example, the Armagh Diocese of the Roman Catholic Church have asked me to share our experiences of being transparent for their purposes in a few weeks' time. So first of all, we embrace truth. The second thing is we embrace justice. Now, justice is a biblical word. Micah 6 verse 8. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Justice in the Scriptures is a verb more than a noun. It's putting things right. It's protecting the innocent, ensuring human rights, having processes that are fair for everyone. We all, don't we, have this God-given desire for justice. So if you listen to the children, the first thing they learn is to say, that's not fair. We have a desire to see goodness rewarded and evil punished. We desire to live in a state which protects the vulnerable. Yet we live in a world where justice can fall and where it appears as though evil flourishes and goodness goes unrewarded. So many people in both communities do feel frustrated and angry that no one was found guilty for crimes perpetrated in the past against their relatives. We join with the psalmists of old who lamented the lack of justice in their society. Now, the very word justice can be contested, and I'm making a generalization here, but generally the Unionist Protestant community tends to see justice as punishing wrongdoers, whereas the Catholic/nationalist community tends to see justice more in terms of human rights. We confess we have lived in a place where historically there's been injustice, no matter how you define it, on all sides. Discrimination on account of religion, but also injustice as violence has gone unpunished. Fleming Rutledge, in her book on the crucifixion, emphasizes the need for justice. Peace without justice is an illusionary peace that sets the stage for vengeful behaviour later on. So we embrace truth, we embrace justice, and thirdly, we embrace mercy. See, none of us could live with perfect justice. We all need God's mercy. Trevor Ringland, former Irish rugby player, wrote a letter to the newsletter a few years ago. He talked about two prominent ideologies: violent republicanism and hard unionism. He writes, those two deeply flawed and hate-filled ideologies caused our conflict, playing us all off against each other. The strategies were driven by self-interest, with too often appalling outcomes for the people who the ideologues cared little for and who were fodder for their ambitions. There has been little room for mercy in the public sphere. When we remember the past, we need to remember with some mercy, with a view to healing, not bitterness, nor just proving a point. Separate communities have bred separate memories. On the media, both sides indulge in what is called whataboutery. But in homes and streets, maybe there may be more mercy. My first job as a minister, the first time I put on this collar, was being a summer assistant to Dr. Godfrey Brown in Ballycastle in 1981. It was a difficult time during the hunger strikes. And one of my jobs was to visit every caravan. And I visited RUC caravans. And one widow talked about her fears for her son. She said this, I'm bitter against bitterness. I don't want my son exposed to the bitterness of the wider family. And I've talked to many brave widows like that who have shown mercy to future generations by not remembering with bitterness. I remember once being in a room with some Presbyterian ministers and some leading Republicans, as well as a few loyalist ex-combatants. And we heard stories of loss on both sides. Now, we wouldn't have agreed on religion. We wouldn't have agreed on politics. We had no agreed story of the past. But everyone in that room had humanity. And there was palpable empathy. So that we allowed each other to remember with mercy. So to remember well, we have to embrace mercy as well as truth and justice. And then fourthly and finally, we embrace peace. At the time of Jesus, there was a popular phrase in Latin, the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. Rome, the dominant superpower, really lacked the concept of peace or pax. They boasted about the peace they could bring. But let me tell you this, I studied ancient history, Pax Romana was peace at a great cost. There was no freedom in the Roman Empire. You had no choice but to subject yourself to empire, or Rome would simply destroy you. So Jesus in John 14 says this, and I want you to listen to what he says. My peace I leave with you, not as the world gives, not as Rome gives, but Jesus' peace. The peace of Jesus is completely different from Pax Romana. God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit offer a radically different vision of peace. It is a peace which is eternally connected with justice and fairness. God the Father does not boss his Son around. The Trinity works together in peace. There's still a need for peace in Ireland, true reconciliation. We are glad the Northern Ireland Executive is up working again. But I hope it's not just about two big parties dividing up power and goodies. We need true reconciliation, not just on the Hill, but in our communities. I've given you an example of sitting with leading loyalists and Republicans and there being empathy in the room, but that doesn't always happen. There was another time we were the same Presbyterian ministers, but we were in the room with different Republicans. And what we heard was simply chilling in its depth of hatred. J.M. Coetzee is a South African award-winning author. He wrote the novel Disgrace. And in it there's a discussion between a father and his daughter. They had been attacked by three men on her small holding in the country. He was injured and unable to protect her while she was raped. She didn't want to talk about it, but eventually she said, "It was done with such personal hatred. Why did they hate me so?" The father offered the following, which was relevant also to what we heard. It was history speaking through them. It may have seemed personal, but it wasn't. It came down from the ancestors. And we have inherited much ancestral hatred. It seems to me, from talking to some of these people, that their aim was to create, the aim of the terrorists was to create chaos and anarchy, to disrupt society, affect commerce, and take out leaders. So I've asked myself, who are the heroes of the past? Those who participated in Jesus' peace. In considering grace, we call them the quiet peacemakers. The business people who put up a sign, business as usual, so that commerce continued. The people who made simple efforts to keep communities together, many working through churches. Those police who sought to keep the peace justly with humanity, fairness and dignity, day after day when under threat. The school teachers who kept order in school when chaos existed on the streets. The civil servants in local councils who modelled power sharing long before the Good Friday Agreement. The rugby players and supporters who kept coming down south and making friends through sport throughout the island. The ministers who kept order each Sunday as they said, "Let us worship God," and preach faithfully from the Scriptures. And I've discovered this as well, that we are all people. One man worked with blood transfusion, and he said this in the book. Funny enough, there was no orange blood or green blood. He said, "I noticed there was just red blood. Everyone bleeds the same way." Peace was kept by those who worked with both sides in hospital wards, treating all patients with dignity, sometimes nursing both perpetrator and victim simultaneously. In Union Theological College in September 2022, we organised an event to remember together partition. The first Parliament before Stormont was built met in Union Theological College. Now this was an event not to celebrate but commemorate, and it turned out to be the only inclusive event of that year. They all turned up, including Sinn Féin. There's a challenge, not just to remember our past, but to remember our past together when we tell our stories honestly. And it's difficult, but we need peace as well as mercy, truth, and justice. In conclusion, there's only one person who can be truthful, just, compassionate, and peaceful. Only one person held these four virtues perfectly together in a square. Only one person lived the shape of reconciliation. And that person is Jesus Christ. He was truthful in all his relationships. He was just, treating all people equally and fairly. He was compassionate towards and showed mercy to sinners. He was a man of peace, reaching out to people from different backgrounds, whether it be female Samaritans or butch Roman centurions. This morning, can I appeal to you? Come to Jesus. He's the one who can lead us into a better future, so that we steward peace in this place and at this time in which we are called to live and witness. He leads us to the better day we read about in Revelation, a day when heaven comes to earth, a day when terrorizing lions and vulnerable lambs can play together, a day when people from all nations, tribes, and languages worship together at the feet of the Lamb, a day when there will be no more tears and no more weeping. Mercy now and justice meet, peace and truth for aye embrace. Miroslav Volf writes, "Our minds will be wrapped in the goodness of God, and in the goodness of God's new world, and the memories of wrongs will wither away like plants without water." So this morning you're being called to participate in God's peace. God is working in Belfast. Be a steward of God's peace in 2024 in this place.